Okay, this session we're going to deal with thinking and problem solving. The last of the three that we're going to deal with. Remember though, as I said, this is the first thing your kids start doing. But in terms of discipline, from your point of view, they get to do this if they're willing to do these. So you start out with a child thinking and doing things that you don't want them to do, and then you teach them that you're going to have to think it through better. You're going to have to take responsibility for it because I'm going to hold you accountable. And you're going to have to be disciplined enough to get the job done the right way so that you get to stay in charge of choosing your own consequences. I had a situation with my kids when they were little in that we had household chores. You know, that's one of those things that you teach your kids. You got to have household chores and teach them what? What do we teach them household chores? Responsibility. Remember that one? Got to teach them some responsibility. Well, it works, kind of. But what I want to talk about is the fact that at this time, they were rotating the chores. And you got a certain set for 1 week, and then you went to the next set, and you went to the next set. And so in 5 weeks' time, you'd covered the whole circuit. And I had doled these out. Okay, this is one set, and this is another set, and this is another set. What was interesting about those was that whatever week a particular child had a set, that was the hardest set of chores. Obviously, 3 times as hard as what anybody else had to do. And it was consistent. Didn't matter which ones they had. That week, that was the toughest ones. And all I was getting was complaints, complaints, complaints. Dan, I don't know what this is. I've got the hardest thing to do. Nobody else works as hard as I do. And I decided, why am I in the middle of this? I'm getting all these complaints. And there's no way to solve it because it isn't going to change. It doesn't matter how they get them. They're always going to complain that whatever they have is the worst. So I'm going to solve that. And I called them in and said, okay, kids, got a new deal for you. There was another one of those weird dad and his new deals. He said, here's what we're going to do. From now on, I am not going to tell you what chores you have. These are all the chores. They've got to be done. You divide them up any way you want. And you determine how you're going to do them any way you want. I mean, it's up to you. All I'm saying is, get them done. Again, all I was looking at was results. You get the results I want, I'll leave you alone. Now, what did it change? Actually, nothing. Because they ended up divvying them up pretty much as I had. I don't think they changed anything. But even if they had, it didn't matter. Because in 5 weeks, you were going to get those jobs no matter what. It's kind of like that old thing of how do you, two men are going to divide a loaf of bread. How do you do it so that neither one cheats? Well, you have one cut the loaf, and the other one gets first pick. And so it doesn't matter how you do it. Everybody's is all going to even out in the end. So I didn't care how they divided them up, because in 5 weeks they were going to get every set of chores. But the nice thing was, if they didn't like it, who were they going to complain to? Not me. Don't talk to me. Talk to your brothers and sisters. I'm not in charge of that anymore. You are. If you don't like it, you change it. And what was I telling them? Let's do a little practice on figuring it out for yourself. Now you see, this was not a discipline issue. This was not you're doing something wrong. This was a matter of saying if there's a way to let your child do the thinking, let them do it. They need to practice. I didn't need practice on how to divide up chores. I knew all about how to do that. They didn't. You need the practice. So I turned that over to them. Now there's an important aspect of this that you may or may not find, I won't say you won't agree with me on it, but you may have to ponder this a little bit, and that is that as long as you do the thinking and problem solving and don't turn it over to the child, when you're doing it and it's not necessary, it leads to tyranny. You say, wait a minute, what do you mean leads to tyranny? Well, let's take it to its ultimate. When one person in any group, whether it's a household or let's take a country, if one person does all the thinking and problem solving and tells everybody else how it's going to be, what do we call it? It's a tyranny. That's a tyrant is in charge. And what it creates that you do not want it to create is it creates, well, somebody said hostility one time. Yeah, but it creates dependency. Believe me, dependency is not what you want your children to grow up learning. You want them to learn to be independent. Now, I know that sounds a little scary, and that's why parents tend to keep thinking for their kids long after the child can do it for themselves. But if you hold them accountable for what they think, it's not that frightening. The problem with parents most of the time is when they turn over control, they lose control. So the more that they can hang on to, the better they feel. But what you have to do ultimately is turn it over to, because if you don't, at some point in life, they can take it away from you. So the idea is turn it over to them, turn it over without losing control. And the way we do that is we give it to them and then hold them accountable for what they think. Then we give them the practice. Believe me, you want to see them practice because you want to see them get better at doing this. In order to do that, you've got to take the risk that they're going to make some mistakes along the way. So you keep control by holding them accountable for what they do and then adjusting it if they're doing a bad job. But they must at some point have their independence. A 25-year-old child who has not learned to think and problem solve for himself is a 25-year-old child. And they can never be in charge of their own life. If you have to wait for somebody to tell you what to do, you're not in charge. That is a very critical part of being a free, independent, functional human being. It's not just being responsible and self-disciplined, it's thinking things through so that the degree to which you are responsible and self-disciplined is moving you ahead in life and not just moving you in circles. But remember, if we keep doing the thinking and problem solving, at some point it becomes tyranny. And the question is a simple one to ask. At the end of the day, you can just ask yourself, in my interactions with my child, who did the thinking and problem solving? In other words, whose decision was it? Was it mine? Was it theirs? Did I tell them how to do it? Or did I say, figure it out and give them a chance to work it through on their own? And if they couldn't, maybe at some point I do step in and help. But first, I back off and see what can they do on their own. When I gave my kids a budget, I backed off to see what could they do on their own. It's very important that they learn to think and problem solve for themselves. This is where parents, see, you start out doing all three of these for your child. You're the one who's responsible. You're the one who does all the disciplining. And you're the one who thinks for them in the beginning. The important part is to remember that at some point they've got to do all these things for themselves, and I've got to train them to do all three. This one they will do on their own, but how well they do it will depend upon whether or not they take the job seriously and whether or not they are aware that there are consequences for what you do over here. If they are aware that there are consequences and they can't just have no consequences like this, but that yes, something will happen, then they will learn to think in terms of the consequences, which is as good as it gets. Now there's some little ways you can do this. Let's take a child, let's go back to some early things with children. You've got a child. Bedtime, that's a good one. You might get a child to bed, and they're supposed to be in bed at, let's say, I don't know, 8 o'clock. And you go through the ritual, right? I need a drink, and I need to go to the bathroom, and I need this, and I need that. and I need a story read to me, and I need my special blanket, and it doesn't matter what it is. But what I don't encourage is don't argue with the child about this, and don't get into a power struggle. Instead, turn it around. Make the child responsible for what they need. And of course, why weren't you thirsty 20 minutes ago? The bathroom has been available all evening. Okay? Oh, all of it comes up now at bedtime. Which, you know and I know, it's their way of stretching it out for an extra half hour. There's nothing more to it than that. So, okay, let's play the game with them. I need a drink. Oh, you really need a drink? Yeah. Okay, well, you need to get your drink. I need to go to the bathroom. You really need to go to the bathroom? Yeah, I really need to go. Okay, well, go to the bathroom. Don't argue with them. Let them tell you all the things that they've figured out that they need. Because when it gets all finished and you're tucking them into bed and it is 8:30 instead of 8 o'clock, and you say, honey, did you get everything you needed? Yeah, Mom, I got everything I needed. You're sure? Yes, I did. Good. Well, I tell you what, your bedtime was 8 o'clock and it's 8:30 now. Yeah, I know. Well, that's okay. There's no problem with that, honey. But tomorrow night, in order to make sure that you get all the things you need, because I don't want to deprive you of anything you need, certainly not if you need to go to the bathroom. What kind of an idiotic parent would do that? And certainly not if you need a drink. What kind of a mean parent would do that? So in order to make sure you get all the things you need, we're going to move bedtime to 7:30. So that extra half hour that keeps creeping in here, you'll have time to get all those things that you need. Who told you they needed them? They said they needed them. I'm just saying, if you need them, you got them. But since 8 o'clock is your bedtime, we need to start on those things at 7:30. Now, honey, if you find out that it doesn't take a half hour for all of those things, in other words, if we start at 7:30 and it's 7:45, you're ready for bed, then the next night we'll start at 7:45. And actually, if you can manage to get all those things done ahead of time, we'll just move back to 8 o'clock, and that's when we'll tuck you in. But if you need anything, don't you worry about it, because you can go ahead and get it, and then the next night we'll start adjusting your bedtime again to whatever it needs to be in order for you to take care of all the things that you think you need. Did you notice what's not involved? There is no argument. None. I'm not going to argue with you. Why argue? How do I know for sure you don't? How do I know that if you don't get that drink of water, you're going to die of dehydration at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not even going to know about it? This morning, should have got him the water. Now, I don't care whether it's an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever. Oh, I need that. Okay? Well, you need it? Fine. We just adjust whatever we have to adjust in order to accommodate your need. But we don't adjust it so that all of your needs come after the time that they're supposed to be met. It's like the child who, like my son, who needed more time to cut the grass. I could get it for him very quickly. You got a child who is not getting their homework done. Well, honey, what's the problem? Well, they've just got so much work at school, and besides that, I'm on the tennis team or the cheerleaders or whatever. Well, you need more time, so I think that unless you can get it all done, you're just going to have to give up the team. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, but you need the time, honey. Okay? So don't argue with me about it either. I don't need it. I can do it without that time. Then prove it to me. Don't keep proving that you need the time, because if you need it, I'll give it to you, and we'll cut corners wherever we have to. And if it's you're off the football team, you're off the football team, and they can do without the greatest quarterback in the world. But that's the way it'll be, so don't press me. You need it, you'll get it, and we'll cut someplace else. And it'll be someplace that you would prefer we didn't cut, because it won't fit with your choices. No? Solve the problem. Well, It takes me longer to read the assignments than it does anybody else. I'm really sorry about that, and I am. You don't say that in a cynical way. Or, I'm sorry it takes you longer, but that doesn't change the fact that you've got to do them. If your teacher will say you're excused from reading the assignments, okay, but if they don't, then you've got to work that out, because there are going to be other things in life that you do better than somebody else, and they're going to have to work out their problem. So you might as well figure out now, if I'm a slow reader, I got to give myself more time to read. If you need it, you'll get it. Another question that comes up quite often is, why can't I? Or, well, let's just stick with why can't I. Let's say that your child wants to do something. They ask you to do, they want to do something that obviously they know is against the rules. It's not something new. Why can't I stay up till 11 o'clock? Now you can start into the discussion of, here's why you can't. For one thing, you're 4 years old. Now your bedtime is 9 o'clock. Well, why can't I be up till 10? Now if this is something you've gone through before, then I wouldn't go through it again. I might go through it once just to acknowledge the child has the right to hear an answer if they ask a question. But I'm not going to go over this time and time again. And if they're going to ask me something that obviously they already know the answer to, and that's what we're getting to. If you know this child knows the answer to this question, this is an argumentative question. So how do we stay out of the argument and at the same time acknowledge that the child has asked a question? See, there's the problem. Don't ignore the child. That is not respectful. Even if somebody asks you a question you know is a setup. But we're going to answer the question, and we're going to let the child know, you're not getting me into an argument. In fact, it is going to come right back on you. Well, why can't I stay up till 11? The answer is, you figure it out. Well, I don't know how to figure. I don't understand this. Oh, you don't understand it? No. Okay, well then, see that chair over there by the table? You go over and you sit down and you figure it out. And when you come up with an answer, come on back and we'll talk about it. And they come back with some crazy answer and you say, seems to me like you need more practice thinking. Why don't you go back and think about this again? Or maybe they come up with, it's a more serious question than that, and they come up with an answer that's kind of on and kind of off. Don't tell them what's wrong with it. See, then we're back into lecturing them. No, ask them some questions. Well, have you ever thought about what would happen if this? No. Okay. Well, the rest of it sounds pretty good. Why don't you go back and think about that and come back with an answer to that? And you get the child to do the thinking. I want them to practice, and I want to see how they do at it. And I can be anything from whimsical to very serious, depending upon what they're bringing to me. If what they're bringing to me is foolishness, then I'll be whimsical. You figure it out. If it's really serious, I say, look, why don't you sit down and think through a couple of ways of solving this. And then come on back and let's talk about it. And I'm dead serious. I mean, I want the child to think it through, and if nothing else, they come back and they say, I haven't got the foggiest idea, and they really don't. Then I might ask them some questions. Well, what about this and this? What would happen if this, what would you do if this happened? Go and think about it. I really want to encourage the child to experience that, because I want him to understand, you know, I can do this. And there's a very important message in this about self-image. Because when I hold a child accountable, or I say, you go think about this for a while and come back, tell me what you've come up with. I do that, then what I've told the child is, I believe in you. I believe in you. See, when you do all the thinking for them and you come up with all the answers, what are you telling them? Well, I leave it up to you, kid, but, you know, I'm not so sure you have any idea what to do yet. So let's just play it safe, and I'll keep coming up with the answers, because if they're my answers, they are good ones. And yours, well, yours are so-so. No. I want the child to know that good, bad, or indifferent, I believe in you. And sometimes you're going to come up with some corny answers and some things that aren't too good. But that's okay, because we can always go back and work on that. Just like when I come up with a bad answer in my life, oftentimes I have to go back and figure it out. So use the opportunity in situations with your child that offer the chance to turn over the thinking to them. And it can be all kinds of situations. It can be something fairly elaborate like this, I don't know what to do. I'm having a real problem in school. Well, what do you plan to do about it? Well, I don't know. Why don't you think about it a little bit? Tell me what you think would work. I've got a bully in my class. How are you going to handle it? I don't know. Well, think about it. Tell me what you would like to do in that situation. Let's see what our child knows about handling a bully. Maybe he doesn't come up with the answer that's workable, but at least we give him the chance to think it through a little bit for himself. And it can be other things. I never had a curfew with my kids. It wasn't that I didn't care when they came in. It's just that they came in at, I guess they kind of knew what time they should be home. We had never had a stated curfew. There just wasn't one. If they hadn't come home at the right time, there would have been a stated curfew. See? If you act like an adult, I'll treat you like an adult, leave you alone. If you act like a child, you come in at 2 o'clock in the morning. No 7-year-old of mine is coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning. You be in here by midnight, at least. There. I guess we know who's strict. Okay, so I didn't have a curfew. But every once in a while, one of the kids would ask, like when they ought to be back. And I remember one headed out the door, going to a football game. And they said, what time should I be home? Okay. Now, I ask people when I do a seminar, how would you answer that? And I get all kinds of answers. Somebody says, well, let's see, it's 11:30. Let's say he's going out, it's 6 o'clock, game's at 7. Ought to be home by 11:30. Whatever, or 10:30. It wouldn't matter. And somebody else will say, well, I don't know, where's the game? You ask him where the game is, how far is it there? They're going out for pizza afterwards. Okay, where are they going for that? How long is the drive? And they're doing all this computing in their head, which is wonderful. And the answers, there's nothing wrong with saying be home at 11:30 or asking all this, well, where's it going to be and so forth. Okay, be home at 11:45. But who's doing all the thinking? See, the parent is. So when my kids would say, what time should I be home? My answer was, well, what time do you think you ought to be home? I want to know if they know. I got a 16-year-old going out the door. He said, I have the foggiest notion when I ought to be home. Well, I don't know if you ought to go. If that's all you know about when you ought to be back, maybe you just better stay here. And I said, well, what time should you be home? Now, if the child says, well, I think 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm not stuck with the answer. I just let him say, think again. Very bad thinking on your part. Practice a little bit more. Dad, they're waiting for me out front. Well, then you better come with an answer real quick. How about 11:30? That sounds good. Goodbye. Let them think. Just run through your mind all the opportunities when you could say, you come up with an answer. Remember, just because they come up with an answer doesn't mean you are stuck with it. But it gives you some idea of how far can I trust them. Would I expect them to come up with anything close to a reasonable answer? Well, the only way I'm going to know is if from time to time I check them out, see what they come up with. Okay, I'm going to close with just one other story. And this was a situation where, where one of my sons called me at the office. Oh, it was the time of year we were pruning fruit trees, and we had a double row of fruit trees, and it's a tedious job. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it is a tedious job, and you've got these long handled pruners and everything, and you're up clipping it all out, and we were doing a beautiful job. We got all of them done except for one large apricot tree, which was the biggest of the group, right in the corner. And by the way, when I say big, let me understand, these were not huge trees. These were trees that probably stood 15 to 18 feet tall. They bore a lot of fruit on them. That's what I mean. They were big. So I was at the office, and my youngest son called, and he said, Dad, I just wanted to let you know I pruned that last tree. And I said, well, thanks, son. And I hung up the phone. I thought, gee, that's strange, because he's 10 years old. And, you know, he's pretty small to be out there. That thing even gets to me, because it's a pole that's about 10 feet long. And I thought, well, that's nice. And I thought, oh, he probably went out and, you know, trimmed off about 6 branches and figured he'd done it. Well, I came home and I was right. He had trimmed off about 6 branches. He had taken the chainsaw and he had trimmed off the 6 branches. And I had this tree that came up and went whoop, and that was it. Just stopped. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, Lord. What? Now, here's the dilemma, folks. There is no point going in and jumping on my son. Granted, I would rather he hadn't done it, but here was a 10-year-old who said, there's a job that needs to be done, Dad didn't get it finished, I'll go out and I'll help him, and he was thinking and problem solving. Now, if he had asked me, I would have suggested that he go back and think about this a little bit more, but he didn't ask me, and he did it, so I just went in and told him, I said, thank you, son, very much for pruning the tree, but I think in the future, before you do it, talk to me. And by the way, from that point forward, we have something in our family called chainsaw gardening. You would be amazed how many things can be done with a chainsaw. Now, I am really glad I did not jump on my son about that. Because if I had, I would be carrying around to this day a cloud of guilt that would darken the entire city. Because what happened was, you see, apricot trees only bear on new wood. Well, here was this tree that suddenly lost its whole top, but there's this root system down there saying, what are you guys doing up there? So when the regular season came along, this tree sent out branches like crazy. And when it did, it bore fruit like it had never borne fruit before. I was ready to give him the chainsaw and say, why don't you just do the whole rest of the strip? You know. That tree was phenomenal. Now, you see, the thing about it that I want to point out is this had nothing to do with discipline. And I didn't turn it into a discipline issue because, granted, I thought he'd made a mistake. And it wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't. I just tell you that part of it to let you know that I'm really glad I didn't say anything to him, because I really would have been embarrassed later. My point was that he tried his best. How was I supposed to communicate to him, I believe in you? Not by giving him a tongue lashing. What would I have encouraged him to do next time? Same thing that happens when you run into somebody that jumps on you every time you use a little bit of initiative and do something and they don't like it. Good, bad, or indifferent. In this case, it was good. Doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, or they jump all over your case. The next time around, it's okay. I'll just play it safe. And I won't take the initiative. And if that creates a problem for them, they brought it on themselves. I wanted my kids to take the initiative. I wanted them to be ready to go out in life and take on the world and feel confident about doing things because they figured this is what needs to be done. I wasn't going to encourage that kind of thinking if I jumped on their case every time they did something. I had to accept that sometimes it's going to be wrong. It's like the old saying, do something even if it's wrong. Or as the other fellow said, ready, fire, aim. It makes a lot of sense. You think about it. Because how are you going to know where it's going to land unless you shoot once and see? Well, it's the same thing with making decisions. By the way, that son is not the one that you met here. That particular son has his own business in Redlands. Now, you see, I think that part of the reason that they have done as well as they have, it doesn't have to do with me. I'm very proud of my kids, and they've done well, and it's because they've had the initiative to do it. But I think part of it was that I encouraged them. And I hope I sent the message, I believe in you. And you can send it in a lot of ways. And I'm just going to close with one story that doesn't have anything to do with discipline. But it has to do with trying to trying to let your kids know that you're more than just a parent, that you care about them, that you're a dad or a mom, and that they're important to you. And I had a situation that at the time seemed a real challenge. Well, all of my sons played sports, and when one of my boys was getting started, it was a chainsaw gardener, in sports. He was tiny. And as a result, he started out playing, whatever it is, t-ball. He played a little bit of t-ball. Then he went right into the other. But they were still small. He was like 8 years old. And he didn't have any problem playing except batting. He was so small and so light, he couldn't get a bat light enough that when he swung it, his swing looked like this. It went, and he never hit the ball. Now, when I say never hit the ball, I mean never hit the ball. But also, being his size, he had a terribly small strike zone, and the pitchers in that league were not world class. And he used to get on base a lot, either because they couldn't pitch into his strike zone, or he got hit with the ball. He got hit with the ball a lot. In fact, by the end of his first year in regular ball, as soon as they started to pitch, he started motoring back out of the box. But he stuck in there. He went his entire first year, never had a hit. Went into his second year, and he was on the team that was the seller team anyway, and they had a real hard time keeping kids on this team. But he stuck in there. And I remember about halfway through the second season that he still hadn't gotten a hit, and he seemed to have a lot of bad luck. He either played shortstop or second base, and as a result, a lot of balls don't get hit much farther than that when you're that age. And he seemed to always either be the one who dropped the ball that allowed the other team to make the winning run, or be the last one up and make the out. It seemed like he was destined, like there was some kind of a bullseye on him for this. And so one night we were leaving, and he had been the one who had made the last out, or I think it was made the last struck out, because the other team, I think, was like 30-1. And of course the team was, you made the last out, as though his out was what had made the difference between this 30-1 loss. But we're walking away, and they're shutting down the lights, and it's, and he's kind of dragging along to the car. And I thought, what can I say to my son? That's honest. And is still encouraging. And I was really struggling with it. Because he was feeling bummed out. And like I say, he was on a team where they had at least half of the team at some time or other quit, and they'd get new guys in. But he hadn't. He'd stuck it out, and find the fact he had, up to that point, never yet hit the ball. And I put my hand on his shoulder. And I said, what I admire most about you is that you've never quit. And I didn't know anything else I could say that was honest and yet conveyed how much I respected him as a son and as a ball player. And so there are times when it isn't just being a parent, it's being a mom and being a dad and letting them know, I believe in you. because I think that he had a tremendous amount of courage, and I think he was acting like an adult. And so I just encourage you to think of discipline and as being a parent, the job of teaching your child, as important in terms of giving the child the ability to live confidently on their own. And don't ever give up being a mom or a dad. Don't ever give up baking cookies and reading stories and going to games and going on picnics and all the other things that go with it. Because that's important. But when it's time to be a parent, remember that right then, that's your job. And the good news and the bad news is this: it takes disciplined parents to have disciplined kids. Thanks. Thank you.